If you clicked on this video, you probably know that Nintendo recently announced that Game Boy Advance games have finally arrived to their Switch Online expansion pass. Despite being heavily speculated and even kind of leaked last year, it's taken them quite a while to finally make this happen, but I think the timing is more strategic than random. This month on March 27, 2023, both the Nintendo 3DS and Wii U shop will finally be terminating service, and no longer will owners of those consoles have access to buying digital retro games for Nintendo and Sega's classic consoles, including the handhelds like Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance. Specifically, 3DS owners will lose access to Game Boy and Game Boy Color game purchases, while Wii U owners will lose access to Game Boy Advance game purchases. Though a lot of fans aren't happy that Nintendo is transitioning their retro offerings to a subscription-based model, I for one am excited they're bringing these handheld games forward. And considering the rocky start they had with Nintendo 64's performance quality, it is a relief to see such positive early impressions of the Game Boy apps. These games look and run well and also include scaling and original hardware filter options. But as you know, Nintendo will never throw everything at their fans at once. Their drip feed style of releasing games is already in effect, as only a handful are currently available with more teas per each generation. It's tough to speculate when we could see the next batch of games, or even if they'll release them in batches, but regardless, Game Boy fans have much to look forward to. I think they did a good job with the first wave picks to keep us busy for a little bit, but I immediately started to brainstorm how the library could shape up in the future. It is true that a lot of the best games are first-party Nintendo games, but there's so much more when it comes to the Game Boy Advance. Taking a look at the current list of Wii U Virtual Console GBA list, it may seem like they could just relocate all of these games over and call it a day, but it really won't be that simple. For example, with franchises like Castlevania and Mega Man Zero having their own collections now, it's more unlikely that Nintendo will double dip and secure those games for the service. On the other hand, it looks like we may also see Nintendo pull some new games in, as the Virtual Console was not offering games like the original Tetris or Alone in the Dark for Game Boy Color. That said, here are my 10 Game Boy Advance picks that we should expect to see on the service. Kicking things off with Mario, of course, two of the most popular GBA sports games include Mario Golf Advanced Tour and Mario Tennis Power Tour. Combining solid golf and tennis mechanics with RPG elements, these games have been a staple in Nintendo's library for decades. Graphically designed using the Golden Sun engine, developer Camelot created two fun Mario sports games that feature new and returning characters, several gameplay modes, and a high replayability value. If you weren't pleased with the tennis and golf games released for Switch, then definitely look to these two games to fill that void. Another great game featuring Nintendo's iconic mustachioed mascot is Mario vs. Donkey Kong. Designed as a spiritual successor to 1994's puzzle platformer Donkey Kong on the Game Boy, Mario vs. Donkey Kong is a completely reimagined version with terrific Game Boy Advance graphics, unlockable stages, classic arcade sound effects, and even some dialogue provided by legendary Mario voice actor Charles Martinet. If you're a fan of the original Donkey Kong games, this one is totally worth checking out. Next, we have an absolute Game Boy Advance must-play, Metroid Zero Mission. Arguably one of Nintendo's best remakes of all time, Zero Mission is the original 1986 NES Metroid, remade entirely from the ground up. Here you can enjoy the gorgeous pixel art, superb soundtrack, and up-tempo action as you explore the planet Zebes as bounty hunter Samus Aran, tracking space pirates and stopping them from replicating the dangerous life force draining Metroid species. If you've played Metroid Dread or recently Prime Remastered on Switch and you're interested in checking out the origins of the series, no doubt this is the game to do so. Speaking of remakes, another one that should easily make an appearance on the service is Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland, which is a remake of Kirby's Adventure on the NES from 1993. Similar to Metroid Zero Mission, this game was completely remade to give a classic Kirby game a fresh coat of paint. Beyond the colorful Game Boy Advance graphics, there's also a beefed up soundtrack, minigames, a multiplayer mode, and of course Kirby's copy abilities, which made him such a renowned Nintendo character. A remake of this game's sequel, Return to Dreamland Deluxe, just recently released on the Switch too. Sounds like a perfect time to check out Nightmare in Dreamland if you ask me. Another popular Nintendo character who also has a few Game Boy Advance games that will likely come to the service is Wario. At launch, we can already play WarioWare Inc. Mega Micro Games, which is an all-time Game Boy Advance great. But did you know there's a sequel called WarioWare Twisted? This may be a slightly controversial pick, but let me explain. WarioWare Twisted was a special GBA release back in 2004, and the reason why is because its microgame mechanics were based on a gyroscope that was built into the cartridge. As a result, there was no way for it to be included on the Wii U since its gamepad lacked the technology. But now on the Switch, WarioWare Twisted will finally be able to shine again. We also can't forget about the Wario Land series. At launch as well, we got access to Wario Land 3 for the Game Boy Color, so there's no doubt in time we'll see Wario Land 4 as well. Although it was the only Wario Land game for the GBA, it was highly praised at the time for its wacky energy and fun platforming gameplay, exactly as you know Wario games to be. Another GBA game with terrific pixel art and animation style. Teased during the Nintendo Switch Online announcement was F-Zero Maximum Velocity. Despite being somewhat of a departure from F-Zero for Super Nintendo, it wasn't until F-Zero GP Legend brought back more familiarity to the series on the Game Boy Advance with its re-inclusion of face of the franchise, Captain Falcon. Though the feel of the game may not differ vastly from Maximum Velocity, there are multiple game modes, and this time there's even a story mode you can try out. Also returning is the multiplayer, which will now be easier than ever to achieve due to the Switch's online connectivity feature. Next up is the deep cut of this list, Drill Dozer. In 2005, Game Freak, famous for being the developers of the Pokemon games, decided to take a stab at something new. What we got was the debut of Jill and her Drill Dozer. Sadly, the series was a one and done and was only ever re-released on the Wii U eShop. For being an outstanding GBA platformer, it would only be right for this game to continue on its legacy on the Switch. And since its main gimmick is the rumble feature, it would be able to maintain that on the console. If there was a more obscure game on this list that I'd urge you to try, it's this one. And last but not least, The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords. Okay, technically it's A Link to the Past and 4 Swords, but the latter is the game I'm focusing on. Released in 2002 along with the aforementioned Super Nintendo port, it was the first multiplayer game in the Legend of Zelda series. 2 to 4 players could co-op together using the Game Link cable and essentially experience the action-adventure style of gaming found in A Link to the Past. You could even consider this a prequel to the Minish Cap based on its story and art style. The best part is the multiplayer itself is no longer a hurdle based on what I mentioned earlier about the Switch's online connectivity. I'm sure a lot of longtime Zelda fans will finally be able to experience this game's potential to the fullest now. Well, there you have it, 10 Game Boy Advance games you can expect to come to Nintendo Switch Online. Let me know if you're looking forward to playing any of these high-quality games. I know I am. Next, I'm planning on making a video for 10 GBA games I would like to come to the service that don't necessarily feel like a lock. If you have any suggestions, drop them in the comments. Thanks for watching.